if you're buying a property that already has a tenant in place, Heather, what should they do?
Make sure your rents are right. I mean, I don't know.
It seems kind of like a no-brainer.
Yes, but you might just forget, right? I mean, if you have a good property manager too, they have an eye on that. I just had my property manager email me this week and say, hey, your tenant, their lease is expiring at the end of this month, and I think we should raise rents $50. The market will allow for it. And this property, they've continually raised rents. And I said, go for it. Like, let's do it. So they'll keep their ear to the ground on rents and just make you aware. Let's raise the rent. Some leases will have a clause in them that it just auto renews with a bump in rent. So that's a little different. But in this instance, it's just that they're going to be raising rents on this tenant. And the tenant I may say, hey, if the tenant balks at it, just keep rents where they're at because I have a tenant that's going to renew all day long. However, when we get a property in and they have a current tenant in place, you better believe we're going to the property manager and confirming what it can rent for when that tenant moves out. Because right now, it's almost always more than it's rented for right now. Which makes a big difference.
And this is something, I think part of the reason that I thought this was kind of a no-brainer is we literally, when we're looking at apartment complexes, that's literally what we're doing. We're trying to figure out what's one of the things that we're trying to consider is how far are the rents undervalued if they're undervalued. I guess in the single family space, it's not quite like that because the appreciation comes from the comparable sales around the property, not from the P&L. And so in the apartment world, you're trying to affect the net operating income through the P&L. And that's one of the ways to do it, right? To add value. Well, you really don't add value to a house or to a duplex by increasing the rent. It increases your cash flow, but doesn't increase the value. So I don't think people are consciously looking for that, but we should be right now. All right.
Yeah.
And then, just as an educational process, it's perfectly okay to buy a property that's under rented right now and wait for the lease term to be up, knowing that you can increase the rent
all day long.
And that's one of the ways that you can actually get a decent deal nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So for sure, people should be looking at that. And that's just a super simple one, right? That people should look at.
And sometimes your rents are going up, but they're not going up as fast as purchase prices in a lot of markets right now. So we know that rents are going to go up and they are going up, but it's not keeping pace with the price increase. So the ROI is dropping, but we know it's going to catch up. I mean, just logic. These are 12-month leases. You have a 12-month lease. You can't just raise the price every month because the price of the home went up. So it just takes time. And a lot of our markets, I talked with a builder in Oklahoma last year, and he said it was about 3 months behind from what he could tell, that it took about 3 months for rents to climb up and keep pace. So sometimes what we do is we will negotiate prepaid property management to help offset, because if you can increase the rent on the property $50 when the tenant moves out and the management fee you're paying is $80 a month, it's nearly going to offset. That cash flow will continue once that tenant renews and you bump up rents, or else you get a new tenant in there. So
yeah, and again, guys, this is stuff that you should be doing all the time anyway, right? Mm-hmm. But right now, it becomes critically important so that you can continue to find cash flowing deals, right? So these are some of the things that I guess is our secret sauce, so to speak. But I don't think any of them are secrets. Moses has been doing that. This has been around since Moses was a baby, probably before Moses was a baby. So I don't think any of these things are so crazy. But we keep getting questions about these kinds of things, and then we read in other forums where people really don't have proper answers for some of this stuff, and so it's just important to understand. And we've got a ton more. So let's start going through these, Heather. So we got first two, right? Check your rents, make sure that they're right. If they're not right, well, then figure what it's going to be when the people move out or you raise the rent on them, and make sure your cash flow is going to be good, and then go ahead and buy it.
Yep.
And or if it's new construction, or if it's something where the rents are going to increase, let's see if we can negotiate a couple years worth of some kind of offsetting fee where we can raise the rents in a year or 2 years and offset that cash flow, right?
Yeah,
another way to get into properties.
I'll add something to that, because this is something that I've had a few clients ask me, like, well, why don't I just take a price reduction? Why don't you just reduce the price by that $2,000 credit? And if you do the math on it, with rates as low as they are, because they're low, it barely impacts your monthly payment. It's like no difference in cash flow. But if you get a credit of $2,000 paid to your property manager and you don't have to pay property management for 2 years, yeah, that's a massive impact on your cash flow. So that's, and we also are capped at 2% of the purchase price for conventional loans for seller incentives. And so we have to sometimes get creative. If we have negotiated some closing costs and we want to add prepaid property management, we can't lump it all in with closing costs. The lenders won't allow it. So if it's paid to the property manager outside of closing, no problem. So makes it work really well.